Yeah, I'd said it in the past 2 videos, man. The trade ideas are coming early this season to make up for the lack of significant trade activity in the summer. This is so much better for me because I'm being able to make these videos heading into the holidays, and the ad revenue pays a little bit better over there. But today what we're doing is going over an idea mentioned on TSN Overdrive from 2 days ago. We're talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins, we're talking about their GM Kyle Dubas, and we're talking about the idea of him potentially helping out his old former team in the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'll leave a link in the description to 2 things. Firstly, it is the TSN Overdrive video clip and the Hockey Patrol article that we're also going to look at too that has the transcription of the comments made. Firstly, the Overdrive video. Again, November 25th, 2:11 p.m. PST, what would a Toronto Maple Leafs trade for Sidney Crosby look like? Oh boy, oh boy. Yep, we are diving into this here, eh? Hayes, Noodles, and O-Dog discuss a hypothetical deal of Sidney Crosby landing with the Maple Leafs and the assets of the trade. Okay, let's talk about Sid the Kid and the Leafs first, shall we? Sidney Crosby is in a pretty interesting spot because he is maybe the one guy that I think if he wants something to happen, he probably would get what he wants. If Sidney Crosby wants to stay in Pittsburgh, right now he's got 21 points in 23 games, he's on pace for 75 points, which would be a little bit less than what he is used to, considering he has had, 20 straight point-per-game plus years? This year he is on pace for under a point per game, but realistically, come on, it's Sidney Crosby, he's probably going to get back up there at some point. Last year he had 94 points, the year before that 93, this year he's on pace for 75. The Penguins are also a lot worse this year, so you have to go out there and consider that. But Sidney Crosby, if he wants to stick around with the Penguins, he will. Sidney Crosby, if he wants to get traded, he will. Whatever it is that he wants, he will get, because he is that darn influential with this team, and there is nobody to tell him no. It's Sidney Crosby, for crying out loud. So, if you dive into the idea that we're discussing here, the TSN Overdrive folks had a conversation that would send Crosby to Toronto, and you can actually see in this hockeypatrol.com article what the insider idea is about. TSN's Overdrive program is normally filled with jokes, ribs, and a lot of lighthearted moments mixed in with news, predictions, and opinion. Well, it's the latter that has caused quite a stir among them and hockey fans. Their most recent show had a quite interesting trade proposal, and it involves arguably the face of the NHL since he was drafted, none other than Sidney Crosby. Brian Hayes put out a question about where his co-host would want to see Crosby end up. They bandied around a few ideas before Hayes and Jeff O'Neill kept harping McLennan about a trade. Hayes said this, "Sidney Crosby to whoever. Tell me why this couldn't happen. If Dubas is so afraid to make a trade, you need to fire him immediately. You can't have that type of management. Nobody knows the Leafs better than Dubas and Wes Clark, and face it, every game it gets uglier in Pittsburgh. He lost 6-1 to the Utah Hockey Club." Jamie McLennan offered a pretty wild package for Hayes. "If we're being hypothetical, I'll trade you Sidney Crosby and Tristan Jarry for Joseph Woll, Easton Cowan, a first and a second first. It's a package that Triliving may hang up the phone, but Dubas won't be doing anyone any favors." So, let's talk about this idea here. Just the idea itself. You know, they are spitting, they're going out there just proposing hypotheticals on TV and the radio. Let's talk about some of these hypotheticals here. So Sidney Crosby, of course, fantastic, amazing asset. He's $8.7 million expensive. He is $8.7 million worth of good. And maybe even more than that. He would automatically be one of the better players on the Maple Leafs, as he would be on most NHL teams, and ultimately there isn't really anything that you could say would be a bad thing about this. I guess if you wanted to toss out the center comparisons as to who would be getting more minutes and how everything would be diversified, but who cares? You have Sidney Crosby. Think about having Matthews, Crosby, and Tavares as a 1-2-3. That sounds pretty nuts if I say so myself. And then, if you think about the power play as well, imagine Crosby and Marner setting up Matthews and Nylander. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? The real meat and potatoes of this trade comes in the other assets, because Tristan Jarry is a very negative asset, and there's a reason he is being tossed out there as a potential goaltender on the move in this sort of a deal. Jarry in 2024-2025 has a terrible record at 29 years old. He is 1-3-1 with an .869 save percentage and a .441 goals against. A big far cry from the .903 he had last year and the .909 he had the year before that. Kinda ridiculous that he even had a .919 save percentage back in 21-22. Is this even the same guy? He also had a .921 save percentage back in 2019-20. It's been 5-6 years since then, and now Tristan Jarry is total dog water. He's doing alright in the AHL, or at least he was before he got recalled back up, and now in the Pittsburgh organization he is essentially the 1B, if not the backup, to Alex Nedeljkovic. Joel Blomqvist actually did have the best numbers out of these three, but still, Jarry has been bad. And if you wanted to project that kind of a contract into the future, then you gotta go out there and say, hey, Jarry is making $5 million till 2028, so that certainly is not gonna be too easy to move. You would have to attach him to a guy like Sidney Crosby to make the price a little bit more stomachable, but at the same time, if you're Toronto, even if you're getting a bad goalie like Jarry, you're still acquiring Sidney Crosby. So thinking about the assets coming back in return, Joseph Woll, Easton Cowan, a first and a second first. Okay, Joseph Woll is the easy acquisition to understand here. He's a great goalie. Fantastic. Young, inexperienced, unproven? Sure, but he is fantastic. And having the goalie-for-goalie swap would make everything work out roster number-wise between Toronto and Pittsburgh. Woll is just an absolute wall. Pun intended. And he would certainly stabilize the Pittsburgh Penguins' goaltending support in a much better way than they have been used to. He might even be the best goaltender Pittsburgh could use in the past few years here. If you wanted to roll long-term with a trio of Blomqvist, Nedeljkovic, and Joseph Woll, you could really have yourselves a tandem that is ready to make things happen in net for this Pittsburgh team. Maybe it's a sacrifice that you need to make. Also add on the 2 first-round picks and prospect Easton Cowan, and you have yourselves a package that says, hey, Pittsburgh, you need younger guys, you need younger assets, take these. Easton Cowan has had a year-long point streak in the OHL, and it is absolutely unbelievable to see how much of a steal this guy is proving himself to be for the Toronto Maple Leafs as a 2023 first-round talent in the 28th overall spot. The guy has 25 points in 18 games this season, which is a little bit of a step down from the 96-point campaign he had in 54 games last year, but he also was an OHL champion, so he was a part of that London Knights team that put it all in to win it all. You could infer that the London Knights this year aren't as good, but they're still first overall in the OHL, so I don't really think that's too much of a problem here. Easton Cowan has just been the best Toronto Maple Leafs prospect in a while to come out of a spot like this, so sending that along with 2 other first-round picks to Pittsburgh along with Joseph Woll, you are really helping out the youth and sending over assets that could help the team today too. If you really wanted to push Easton Cowan, he might be able to challenge for an NHL spot sometime this season, maybe towards the end of the year, and Joseph Woll, we already recognize he can be that good too. But if this package is the package that it takes to get it done, my question is to you, do you do it? Do you think it's worth it? Do you think that the tremendous upward value of Sidney Crosby is properly equaled in the negative value of Tristan Jarry, and do you think that package deal combined is worth Joseph Woll, Easton Cowan, and 2 first-round picks? The Overdrive guys are just spitting, but I wanted to talk about this trade idea and trade proposal on the YouTube channel just to get some conversations going and to see where people's heads are at in regards to Kyle Dubas potentially helping out his old team. Do you think there's a likelihood that Sidney Crosby could get sent over to Toronto of all teams? And do you think this package makes sense? The comment section is your floor. I'll leave a link in the description to both the video on TSN Overdrive as well as the article that we read. What are your thoughts on this trade idea? If you're a Pens fan, do you think it works? Do you think you would like assets like Cowan and Woll and 2 firsts? Or do you think there's a little bit more that Toronto needs to add on to make this sort of a deal go through? Maple Leafs fans, how do you work your lineup if you have Sidney Crosby? And are you fully fulfilled with Anthony Stolarz to say, okay, you are the number 1 guy now. We are going Stolarz and Jarry for the rest of the year. Jarry stinks, so we're really going to be relying on Stolarz. Is that an idea that you're comfortable with exploring? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.